Hey everyone, welcome back to Trends Talk. If you are just joining us for the first time, I'm Sarah Sladek. I'm your host. I'm so glad that you are here. The whole purpose of the show is to talk about trends on a various topic or theme. And today I am joined by Jaimie Francis from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. And the topic today, folks, is a hot topic. It is workforce development. Now, when we say workforce development, it can sound kind of kind of meh, kind of boring, right? Like, who gets super excited about workforce development? It doesn't sound very sexy. But you know what? It is really important. It is more important right now than ever before because if we don't have workers, if we aren't training workers, if we don't have the human capital, we don't have industry, we don't have jobs, we can't compete, we don't have productivity, we don't have profitability, and so on and so forth. So, workforce development, it's really important, and I'm excited to delve into it with Jaimie today. So, Jaimie, I'm going to welcome you to the stage. Please turn on your camera. And Chris is going to cue up the slide. We're going to do Q1, round one. And the question I have for Jaimie is, what current stat or data point best summarizes the need for workforce development? We got to explain to people, why is this important? Why is this needed? So Jaimie, I'd love your perspective.
No, I never follow instructions perfectly, so forgive me because it's technically two data points. The first one being that right now we have 6.4 million people unemployed, and yet we have 8.8 million open jobs. And so you do the math, even if you were to fill every single open position with every person that we have unemployed, we would still experience a gap of more than 2 million people. And so to me, nothing is more dire than recognizing just how significant of a gap that is. And if you think about all of the repercussions, all of the consequences that goes along with those jobs remaining open, of businesses not being able to grow and to compete, for communities to not be able to thrive and prosper, and from an individual standpoint is, how can I make sure that I am entering into education and training programs that are not going to just help me land that first job, but advance over the course of my career. So there are all these, it's like an onion, and peeling back that onion just in terms of how many layers we need to think about the consequences that are tied to those statistics. I think is just really important to acknowledge, and then not just recognize, but do something about it.
Yeah, and Jamie, a quick follow-up question to that, because a lot of people think that this just happened during pandemic. Is that true?
Absolutely not. This has been a gap that we've been experiencing, for many years. Certain industries, of course, experienced more of a gap as a result of the pandemic. But in something like healthcare, the pandemic just exacerbated, just really emphasized where those gaps, where those challenges are, and did spur some, communities, some industries into action. But quite frankly, we still have a lot of work to do, and we're going to need everybody off the bench if we're going to be able to achieve the type of success that I think we're capable of.
Yeah, great insights. And holy cow, super scary stats, right? When we think about millions of people, there being this huge gap in our workplaces. So we got to bridge that. It's very important. By the way, if you have a question today for Jaimie, please enter it in the chat. We'll get to questions later. But first, I have Q2 for Jaimie. So round two. The question is, what are some examples of workforce development practices employers can easily and immediately implement? Again, I think when we talk about workforce development, it sounds very big, very broad, very scary. So I'm asking Jaimie, you're on the hot seat. I'm curious, okay, if I am employer, small business employer, which I am, but let's just say I need workforce development practices, or how can an industry leader, or how do we make this real for people? So curious to know your thoughts to round 2 question.
I'll tackle this in a couple of different ways. Because of our affiliation with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, the U.S. Chamber Foundation has an opportunity to work with employers of all sizes, from all industries, from all different types of communities. And so here are a couple of things that I would suggest to those who are wrestling with this question of, well, what do I do about it? You've told me how bad the problem is. What am I going to do about it? One thing that we really encourage is for employers to acknowledge their importance in a talent supply chain. And so supply chain management principles are something that many employers are familiar with. It's how they run their day-to-day operation. They know that it's critically important for them to consistently communicate, what do I need? Where do I need it? When do I need it? What are the quality standards that I need it to beat? And we say, well, what if you took those same principles and applied them to your talent without you as the employer constantly communicating those pieces of information? You would never get what you actually need for your business to succeed, right? But we assume that people are just going to show up when we need them, meeting the quality standards that we need them to meet, when, at the location that we need them to show up. And that's just simply not realistic. So we encourage employers to say, put yourself in the position as an end customer in a talent supply chain, so that you are consistently thinking about what your true needs are for your business to succeed. So what is that job that you're having a really difficult time filling? Don't just rely on your, kind of anecdotes or memory to be able to provide that type of information. Is you actually have the very best labor market information right at your fingertips. It's within your own organization in terms of figuring out, well, how long has that position gone unfilled for? Where have I gotten talent that has been successful for that role? Who are my talent sources? And then what are the critical skills that I need for someone to be able to meet, to succeed in this position? Can I look to my most kind of qualified talent to help me identify what is the best way for me to communicate what those critical skills needs are? What do you really need to be successful in this role on day one? And then what is the plan that I, as the employer, can put together so that over time you're gaining additional skill sets so that you can, again, continue to thrive in that role and hopefully advance to a new role. So it's a bit of getting organized, quite frankly, and doing our homework as employers of what those true needs are, and then thinking very thoughtfully about how can we communicate that information to our education and training partners, where I do typically get talent from, but also to your own employees, right? So if you're struggling with retention, which I know comes up a lot for employers, if you're struggling with retention, thinking about, well, what are the building blocks that my entry-level talent would need in order to advance in their careers? Because that could be a really good retention tactic. So really thinking very thoughtfully, what are the true needs for these roles that I'm either having a difficult time filling or difficult time retaining? And then how can I make sure that I'm, setting up my existing and future employees up for success? Employers, in our opinion, have really the greatest role in the talent supply chain, and that, the currency that speaks the loudest in this world, it's jobs. And nobody knows those jobs better than employers, but we can do a lot to be better communicators of what those jobs are, what it takes to be successful in those jobs. And so you play such an important role as an employer to be able to describe those things effectively, and then be willing to partner and collaborate with others in your area who may be experiencing similar pain points as you. So you might not be the only one struggling to find, certified nursing assistants or retaining those positions. You might not be the only one who is experiencing difficulty increasing workforce diversity for your entry-level IT workers. So is there a way for you to get greater responsiveness from your education and training partners if you're a smaller employer and you're like, oh, I've only really got 2 of these positions. I know my competitor down the street has 5 of these positions. Like, what if you all worked together to walk through a process, a structured process to say, what are our true needs and how can we be greater communicators? You might get more responsiveness, you might have more leverage if you're working as a group that's all experiencing these pain points together. And then hopefully expanding that pipeline so that you're all benefiting from those solutions that you put into play with your education and training partners.
So, Holy Toledo, I feel like we just got a wealth of information, but it's also just really apparent to me, work is changing and this idea of workforce development, some of this is new. Like we have to think about things a little bit differently as employers and approach these skills gaps. And, we're hearing so many buzzwords now like skills gaps, critical skills and knowledge, talent development, supplier management, things that we weren't thinking about even 5 years ago. So it's fascinating to delve into this and to really broaden our expertise and intelligence on this particular topic. But let's go to question 3. We'll keep it going here. So Q3, Jaimie. All right. So we've already talked a little bit about this with your response to the last question because Holy Toledo, there's just a lot of change happening. But let's talk about the future. I'm curious to know, based on your experience working with a variety of industries, working with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, you're seeing lots of businesses, lots of change. How do you think the workforce of the future is going to differ from the workforce of today? Jaimie, curious to hear.
This is a really fun question, and I'm going to give you my optimistic Jaimie answer because I think that we all tend to get overwhelmed by the challenges that are presenting us today and thinking about what that's going to look like in the future. And it can feel really daunting, as you said, like there's a lot of change happening. Our workforce, our labor market, everything is changing so much faster than it ever has before. So how can we prepare ourselves for those changes? How can workers prepare themselves for those changes? How can employers do so? How can education and training partners? There's so many different ways to tackle this question, but the optimistic Jaimie says, rest assured, like we will find a way to persevere. And there's a lot of exciting opportunities for thinking about what the workforce of the future looks like. I just came back from an education technology conference called ASU GSV out in San Diego, in which there were tons of brilliant people, thinking about the workforce of the future and how to adequately prepare students to succeed in the workforce. And something that kept coming up time and time again was the role of AI, of artificial intelligence, and how that's going to weigh into how students are prepared and how employers are implementing these models to change the skill sets and what's needed for an employee to succeed in a role. And while sometimes it can be a little bit scary to think about the potential jobs that will be replaced, what the research is showing is that there's actually going to be more jobs available as a result of AI. So how can we make sure that those potential roles that would be displaced, that those people are being equipped with the skill sets so that they can succeed and hopefully be able to attain even better jobs that will help with their own economic mobility and to be able to support themselves and their families and contribute to their communities. So I think that it is inevitable, in my opinion, that we're going to have to figure out, even though it feels like a big nut to crack, we're going to have to figure out how we are equipping people with ethical, responsible, but also helpful uses of AI in their work, no matter the industry that we're talking about. There's been so much focus over the past couple of years, at least in the education and workforce space, around skills-based hiring and advancement. And this, in our opinion, it doesn't mean that degrees or credentials are completely going away. I don't necessarily think that will ever be the case. But it is so important for us to be thinking about, if you do have a degree, what does that mean in terms of the skills that you are able to demonstrate? How are those skills demonstrated, and how would a potential employer assess them? So I'm hopeful and I'm optimistic that we'll continue to get smarter about how to use skills for hiring purposes and advancement purposes, so that it is, a complementary way of thinking about, the importance of a person being able to continue their education. It just might look a little bit different than it does today. It might mean more, micro credentials, so shorter term training programs that are hopefully going to be more accessible to more people. Because if we go back to that stat that I shared at the beginning of today's conversation, when we're, over 2 million people short, and we're thinking about what's the skill attainment that people need to be able to access these open roles, if we're talking about degree programs or credential programs that are shorter term, hopefully, more accessible in the sense of, oh, this is a boot camp that I can attend over a couple of weeks once my kids have gone to bed, or once I've, completed my full-time job during the day. And this is something that's going to help me advance in my career, again, advance in economic mobility. To me, that's really exciting. That means, access for more people, for them to be able to access great jobs and advancement opportunities. So I think that intentionality about skills is so important, and it's why we really emphasize why employers need to be very thoughtful about the language that they're using to communicate those skills, and how it is that we're equipping people with the accessibility to attain those skills. So skills is really the topic du jour in terms of workforce development. And that's going to be really important as we think about the workforce future, is what is the role of skills, and are we doing enough to help employers and to help education and training partners transition to more of a skills focus? So as I said, degrees are still important, but we can't use them as a wholesale replacement, to say, okay, well, if somebody has a degree in XYZ, that means that for sure they are, advanced in this particular skill set. Like that's simply not the case. So how can we make sure that we're translating, what people are learning and capable of doing, and what that will look like in the workforce, I think is really important. In our world, we're talking a lot about learning and employment records, which are called more short LERs, and how those can be used for a person who might have different lived experiences than somebody, who has gone through a 4-year degree program and are able to use that degree in order to access a job. How can we use some of those lived experiences if you've been in the military, or you have participated in some really great work-based learning experience, but haven't figured out a way to translate that so that employers understand what you're now capable of doing? How can we give people a little bit more agency over their own information and their own lived experiences, is something else that I'm hoping to see in kind of the future workforce world, that I think is really exciting and promotes a lot of opportunity.
Yeah. That's excellent. And I think when we think about how the workforce will be different, so much of what you're alluding to is speed, right? We have to be adaptable. We have to continue move people into leadership faster, move people into jobs faster, be nimble. We have technology coming into the fold. Things are going to constantly be changing. So yeah, it's not one job for the rest of your life, one degree for the rest of your life. We're really alluding to this era of change and even creativity, which I think as more AI comes into the fold, we'll see the need for, or the opportunity to become more creative and use that human capital in new and innovative ways. So all right, fantastic. We only have 2 questions left, so let's get to them. Let's get to Q4. Jaimie, what are 3, real quick, 3 core practices which have been proven to increase employee retention based on your insights and experiences working with U.S. Chamber of Commerce? What are 3 practices that are increasing retention?
We recently had an opportunity to explore the concept of job quality, and there were a couple of things that came out of this as a learning experience for our talent pipeline management network, which is made up of our chambers of commerce and other business-facing organizations that are bringing together employers and really thinking thoughtfully about talent strategy. And some of the key learnings from that experience was centered around employee voice. And like, I'll give you the simplest one first, right? Is ask your employees, ask them what is important to them, because I've heard from a number of employers that, too quickly we kind of jump to the assumption that it's all based on pay. And I'm not saying that pay is not important, because it is for people to, make wages that will to support themselves and their families. But it's not always just pay, right? There are other features of job quality that can matter significantly to employees. So employee voice is one of them. And, many people are familiar with kind of this concept of an exit survey. But I've heard of some employers instituting stay surveys. Like, what would it take for you to stay? And so some of the things that have come up as a result of those conversations, centers around learning, development, and advancement opportunities. Is what, as we discussed earlier, what are those building blocks for me to be able to advance in this role? So as you have new positions or, positions, roles that are changing within your organization, thinking about upskilling and reskilling your existing workforce could be a really great retention tactic. So that would be one of them. Another one would be around management and supervision, and thinking about how are you equipping your staff that are maybe new to management roles? How are you making sure that they're prepared to go into those roles successfully, both from the context of their own personal growth, but then also certainly as retention for your entry level talent, because we know that a lot of people will stay if they have a really great manager. So thinking about what are some of those trainings, those development opportunities that you could do for those new managers to make sure that they're prepared to take on that important role. And then another one, I've loved this concept. It's what our colleagues at the Kentucky Chamber are calling an employee collaborative. So through our Talent Pipeline Management Initiative, we talk about the development of an employer collaborative, a group of employers coming together to talk about similar pain points. Well, in parallel, the equine and agriculture industry in Kentucky set up an employee collaborative, which gave employees a safe space to talk about the challenges that they were experiencing. And it wasn't, associating them with any particular employer. It was more so about the role that they played within their organization, and that they could contribute ideas for, what is typically a very arduous, very laborious kind of task associated with farmhands at these various equine farms, and thinking about, well, how could we try to support closer to a 5-day work week as opposed to a 6-day work week? What are some of the flexible opportunities that we could offer to our employees so that they feel really valued and that they are getting those advancement opportunities? And as a result of this work, they were able to extend the retention for particular employees, quite a big group of employees, from 6 to 8 months to 18 to 24 months, in which they were seeing people not only stay longer, but then advance in their careers and stay with the company. So not just within that role, but within the company and within the industry, which I think promotes just a lot of great opportunity. So hopefully those are three helpful ways to start, but always happy to provide more context. And we've got a great case study on our website about this employee collaborative that I'm happy to share as a follow-up to.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay, Jaimie, we have 6 minutes left in our half hour, so we're going to do a speed round. I have one more question for you, and then there's a couple audience questions that came in. So let's try to answer each of these in like a minute. Sound good?
Okay.
We can do it. We can do it. All right. Round 5, last round. What trends are you currently watching and advising companies to prepare for? What trends?
Yeah, so I definitely I've seeded these over the course of the conversation, but I think the importance of upskilling and reskilling your existing workforce cannot be understated. It is or overstated. It is so important to be thinking about your existing workforce. Particularly, we don't see that gap of the 6.4 million to the 8.8 million having any dramatic changes anytime soon. So really thinking thoughtfully about your communicating those advancement opportunities, or even as roles change, even if it is a horizontal change, communicating those with your existing workforce. Again, great retention tactic. So that one is super important. Thinking very thoughtfully about breaking down the skills that are required to be really successful in these roles, critically important. Thinking about ways that you will be able to use technology to support your work, to make you more efficient, to make you more effective. That's absolutely, absolutely critical. And then I think just given the interesting conversation that's taking place in the US right now about the value of, college education, and thinking about, what training is really necessary to be successful in roles, making sure that those partnerships between your education and training partners and companies are ones that are being candid, quite frankly. Like, how can we use language and our relationships to improve the experiences, the programs of study that students are enrolling themselves in, whether they're trying to get into entry level work or they're trying to upskill or reskill themselves. Having that clear communication between employers and education and training partners will help everybody. It will help education and training partners put together programs of study that are really valuable for students. It will help students be able to go through those experiences and then transition into the workforce seamlessly. And it will obviously help employers be able to get the talent that they need. So much of this is based on relationships. So don't underestimate relationships.
Very good advice. And our two audience cues, we have just a couple minutes to wrap up with those. I want to be sure we get to Greg's two questions. Number one, how do we work with community colleges to offer training and education that are non-degree programs? And number two, how to increase retention of women in the construction profession. So, two questions from Greg. Let's tackle them real fast.
Way to go, Greg. A plus for quality questions. Yes. So tackling them really fast. In terms of partnership with community colleges, we have found these education and training partners to be particularly responsive to employers. So I think that one great opportunity is for a group of employers, maybe through an industry association such as yourselves, to communicate what those needs are, get their house in order, get their facts straight, as we said, and then come to the education providers as a collective group. You don't have to have complete consensus from one company to the next, but if you have a group of maybe 10 companies that are all small to medium sized employers, and they're all experiencing, a similar pain point, maybe they come up with even 10 core competencies that are really essential to succeed in those roles. That's much easier for a community college to respond to than if those companies were coming at that community college partner one by one. So I think that that opportunity to collaborate, to coalesce as a group, get your house in order, and then go to the community college partners, it could also just save those employers a ton of time thinking about all of the work that they're doing as part of advisory boards and councils for colleges. That collective voice piece can be really effective. And then to your other question about women in the construction industry, we've seen some really great success out of our partners in Texas that have supported groups, cohorts of women going through these training programs together, to increase the likelihood that they will actually go into the profession, and then be retained in the profession, because there is so much previous history that has shown that if you feel included, if you feel like you have a place within the workforce, and sometimes that means like having kind of your posse with you in the workforce, then that can lead to greater retention and greater success in the role. So a really great model to look at in terms of our colleagues out of Houston, Texas, and I'm sure that's happened in other places as well. There's also a name an organization, and I can picture the woman, but I can't think of the name of the organization. But Tulane Montgomery is a fantastic person in terms of getting more women interested in skilled trades. In particular, from a young age. So thinking about what are those early education opportunities to connect with young folks and get them thinking about construction opportunities for women that typically don't think about that. So something else to consider.
Wow, Jaimie, so much great information. I so appreciate you being here today on Trends Talk. And special thanks to our audience for tuning in. I heard a lot about relationships, collaboration, and as Jaimie put it, skills, skills, skills. So we have work to do to make sure that work continues to work. Work is changing, and workforce development is more important now than ever before. I'm Sarah Sladek. Thanks for tuning in today. We'll see you next month. Bye.